Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring what it takes to become a secondary school science teacher. And we're using this RoleCatcher guide that someone sent in. And wow, it is seriously in depth.
It really digs deep. I was impressed by just how much it covers.
Yeah, it's not just about, knowing the difference between a Bunsen burner and a beaker. So, say you're passionate about science, love the idea of working with young people. Where do you even begin?
And that's where this guide, I think, is so helpful. It really maps out the entire journey from those first days as like a newbie teacher all the way to, becoming one of those seasoned pros shaping young minds.
Okay, so you're saying it's a journey, not just like a here's your textbook, go teach kind of thing.
Exactly. It's a process.
I like that. And speaking of a process, the guide actually breaks it down into 4 distinct stages. Entry-level, junior, experienced, and senior science teacher. Did you realize it was so, structured?
I honestly didn't. It's interesting to see how the role kind of evolves over time. Like, it's not just about how many years you've been teaching. It's about, the responsibilities you take on.
So you're not just, stuck in the same routine year after year. There's room to grow.
Definitely. And the guide even gives those really specific example profiles for each stage. You really get a feel for the skills and experience you'd need, to progress.
That's really cool, like a sneak peek into your potential future.
Yeah, exactly. So as an entry-level teacher, you'd be, learning the ropes, assisting those more experienced teachers, and just getting a feel for the whole classroom dynamic.
Makes sense. You're not just thrown into the deep end.
Exactly. And then as a junior science teacher, you start, spreading your wings a bit more. You're designing your own lessons, figuring out your own teaching style.
That's going to be exciting, kind of finding your groove as a teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gets even more exciting as you move up. Imagine being an experienced science teacher. You're designing entire curriculums, mentoring newer teachers. They even talk about using data to analyze how effective your teaching is.
Whoa. Data analysis, that's next level. They lost me at data. But seriously, I love that idea of using data to actually see what's working and what's not.
Yeah, it's like being a scientist in your own classroom. They actually call it action research, which I have to admit sounded a little intimidating at first.
Action research. Yeah, that does sound kind of intense.
It does. But when you break it down, it's really about using data from your classroom to constantly, test and refine your teaching methods so you can see what's actually making the biggest impact on how your students are learning.
I like that. So it's not just about following the textbook. It's about figuring out what actually works for your students.
Exactly. And speaking of things that work, the guide talks a lot about how important continuous learning is.
Oh, yeah. You can't just learn once and be done.
Right. Definitely not. They emphasize professional development courses, conferences, always getting new certifications. It's a field that's always changing, always evolving.
Especially with science. New discoveries are being made all the time. You've got to stay up to date.
Absolutely. A good science teacher is always learning.
That's so true.
Yeah.
It's got to keep things interesting. And speaking of interesting, let's talk tech. The guide mentions simulations, online resources. It seems like technology is kind of a big deal these days in the classroom.
Oh, yeah. Huge. It can really transform how you teach. Imagine taking your students on a virtual field trip inside the human heart using VR, or letting them conduct experiments online that would be too dangerous to do in real life.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about. Why couldn't I have had teachers who were into VR? But let's be real. Becoming a teacher, even one with cool tech, means going through the interview process. And this guide, it really dives into all of that.
It's a whole section. They walk you through what to expect during a typical interview, and they even give you tips on how to answer some of those really tough interview questions. It's like having a secret weapon, to help you calm your nerves.
Oh, I could have used that. Do they cover those really specific questions too? What do you say if they ask about how you'd handle a challenging student? I feel like that would be such a tough one to answer on the spot.
Totally. They actually have a whole part on those kind of behavioral questions.
Yeah.
Things like, tell me about a time you had to deal with a disruptive student. Those can be tricky. But the guide gives you some good strategies for, how to handle them.
I bet. That would be so helpful to have a little prep talk before you walk into the interview. But even before you can stress about interview questions, you got to have those, basic qualifications. And it's not like just acing high school chemistry anymore, is it?
No, definitely not. I mean, loving science is step one, but this guide, it really lays out all the formal qualifications you'd need. And it's a whole process.
So what kind of stuff are we talking about? Give me the rundown.
So first off, you usually need at least a bachelor's degree in, a science-related field. So that could be biology, chemistry, physics, environmental science. You get the idea.
Right. Got to have that science background.
And then a lot of places, they also want you to have some kind of formal training in education too. So that could be like a teacher education program you do as part of your bachelor's, or even like a separate postgraduate diploma in education.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you're not just teaching
Who?
like facts and figures, right? You're teaching kids how to think like scientists.
Exactly. And that brings us to teaching certification, which, oh boy, that can be a whole other deep dive depending on, where you are in the world.
So many hoops to jump through. But
Mm.
let's say you've got the qualifications. What about those other like essential qualities that make a good science teacher, the things they can't really teach you in a classroom?
Oh, those are key. And actually, this guide talks a lot about that stuff too, which I thought was really cool.
Oh, like what?
Well, for starters, they talk a lot about the importance of being a good communicator.
Makes sense. If you can't explain something clearly, how are you supposed to teach it? Right?
Exactly. It's not enough to just know the science yourself. You got to be able to break it down, make it engaging, maybe even like a little bit fun for those younger minds.
It's true. My favorite teachers, they always made learning fun.
Exactly. And then there's the whole like patience thing. You're going to be working with students who learn at different paces, who have different strengths, different
Oh,
challenges.
for sure. You definitely need a lot of patience.
The guide actually calls it differentiating your teaching, which basically means you need to be adaptable, flexible. You got to be able to adjust your teaching methods to fit like the unique needs of each student.
So like some kids might learn best by, doing hands-on experiments.
Exactly. Whereas others, they might be more visual learners. They need to see diagrams, watch videos, that kind of thing.
Totally. It's all about meeting students where they're at. And then on top of that, you've got the whole like classroom management aspect too.
Oh, yeah, that's a biggie. Keeping everyone engaged, making sure things don't devolve into total chaos that takes skill.
I can only imagine. Like, what do you do if a kid just refuses to put their phone away?
That's where those classroom management skills come in. And the guide actually gives you some good strategies for that too.
Oh, good. I was starting to get stressed just thinking about it.
Don't worry, it's all part of the job. But it's not all about, keeping things under control. The guide also really highlights all the rewards that come with being a science teacher. Like that feeling you get when you see that, aha moment click for a student, or when they get excited about a new scientific concept. That's pretty amazing.
There's got to be something so rewarding about knowing you're making a real difference in those kids' lives. And it's not just about what you're doing in the classroom, right? Like the guide also talked about how there are all these different career paths you can take as a science teacher.
Oh, yeah, tons. It's not just one straight line from like newbie teacher to retirement.
So like what else could you do?
Well, you could specialize. Like maybe you're super passionate about marine biology. You could become the go-to teacher for all things ocean related.
That's so cool. Teach right by the beach, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting sidetracked. What else?
Or you could move into more of an administrative role, like becoming a department head.
So you'd be like shaping the science curriculum for the whole school.
Exactly. Or even working on curriculum development at a district level.
Mhm.
And then there's mentoring, professional development, even research and publishing.
Whoa, research. Like actual scientists. That's impressive. So there's room to like really make a name for yourself in the field of education.
Absolutely. And for those who are, maybe a bit more entrepreneurial, there's always starting your own tutoring business or even like an educational consulting thing.
So many options. It's not just teaching. It's a whole world of possibilities.
Exactly. But for now, let's maybe come back down to earth for a minute and talk about those job interviews, because the guide really is a goldmine when it comes to that whole process.
Yeah, for real. It's like having a roadmap to interview success. Right? Like it tells you what to expect, how to answer those tough questions, how to really like sell yourself as the best science teacher ever.
It's all about presenting yourself in the best possible light, highlighting your strengths and showing them that you're passionate about science and about teaching.
Like a crash course in how to be amazing. But what about those curveball questions? Like, the tell me about a time you failed kind of thing. Those always throw me off.
Oh, those behavioral questions. Yeah, they can be tricky, but the guide gives you some really good strategies for tackling those too.
Yeah, those behavioral questions are always tough. But it sounds like this guide really arms you with like a whole arsenal of tools and strategies to tackle them. But, at the end of the day, it's not just about, saying the right things in an interview, this guide really drives home the point that being a good science teacher, it comes from somewhere deeper.
Totally. It's about that genuine passion for science, that desire to share that passion with young minds. You can't fake that.
It's got to be real. You're not just like delivering information, you're trying to inspire these kids, get them excited about the world around them. And that world, especially in science, it's changing all the time.
Exactly. And the guide, it really emphasizes how important it is for teachers to be like lifelong learners themselves, always staying curious, always growing, always adapting.
You've got to practice what you preach, right? Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here, everything from the nitty-gritty of qualifications to the deeper purpose of being a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
But before we wrap things up, I do have one final kind of thought-provoking question I'd love to get your take on.
Hit me with it.
So the guide, it focuses a lot on, the practical side of teaching, the skills, the knowledge, the interview tips. But what about the emotional side? Like, how do you create a classroom where every single student feels seen, heard, valued, a place where they feel safe to take risks, to ask questions, to, be themselves?
That's such a great question. And honestly, I don't think there's one easy answer, but I think it starts with creating a space where it's okay to make mistakes.
To not have all the answers right away.
Exactly. A place where curiosity is celebrated, where asking why is more important than knowing all the right answers.
I love that. It's about fostering that love of learning, that sense of wonder. And I think that's something we could all use a little more of, no matter what stage of life we're in.
Totally agree. Well, on that note, I think we've done a pretty deep dive on this one.
I think so too. This RoleCatcher guide, it was seriously impressive. So to everyone listening, if you're even thinking about becoming a secondary school science teacher, do yourself a favor and track down this guide. It's packed with insights, practical tips, even inspiring stories. It's like having a personal mentor in your back pocket. And who knows, maybe you'll be that teacher, the one who sparks a lifelong love of science in some lucky kid out there. And with that, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for exploring with us.